Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's NewsNow podcast installment. Back almost 2 weeks in a row. There was 1 week in between, I think, right?
Yes.
Is Niagara West MP Dean Allison, who is the successful candidate in the Monday evening, or Monday all day, federal election. And we're just going to talk about some of the results locally, Niagara-wide a bit, and on a national scale, as well as discussing a very important Niagara West person who passed away. Dean, Monday night, what did you think? Let's start locally. We were looking at the numbers earlier, and just to skim through in the Niagara West riding, which had over 70% voter turnout. Was that the number I saw?
Yeah, 71.5, yep.
Which is high.
Very high. Compared to the national, what was it, 58% across the country?
And most of the other areas were in the low to mid 60s,
Yeah.
even, right? Yeah. So in Niagara West, the Conservatives were plus 800, and I'm rounding off. Liberals were down 600. NDP was up 500. PPC was at 3,100. Green, I didn't write the number down. I think it was 1,200, but they were down 2,000 from the last election, which is a lot. And CHP was down 600, I believe, to 900 and change, or something in that ballpark. So, first off, just on the flow of votes, how would you assess that on a local scale within the riding?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think what great voter turnout. I mean, to have such a high average over the national one speaks volumes to the people in Niagara West that are very engaged in the process, right? Yeah. Very motivated. And then the other two things you said is that the only two parties' votes that went up were the Conservatives and the PPC. All their parties dropped. So, once again, very grateful to the constituents in Niagara West for showing their support in me again. And I think
just
really,
on that, the NDP did go up 500.
Oh, they did go up 500.
Yep.
Okay, I thought they went down. Okay, that's perfect. So, I think it's to me that just shows the fact that people were in this riding. Because it didn't happen across the country. We're not happy with Justin Trudeau. Didn't believe the reason he called the election, which they couldn't figure out what the reason was. And we're certainly not prepared to reward him with a majority. We're feeling safe, or at least feeling like they needed to at least hold him to a minority government. So that's what we saw across. I can't believe that we ended up almost within seats of where we were literally 5 weeks ago, where we dissolved Parliament in terms of the number of seats that went to. I mean, you couldn't actually. It's like Groundhog's Day. It's not like you could actually predict that you would have an election so tight and so close.
Well, it was really very, very comparable to the last go around in
absolutely.
19, right? So, and in terms of issues, and correct me if I'm wrong, but nothing really changed issue-wise, except for maybe the handling of COVID, and if you're getting into vaccine rollout and management of it, whether it's masks or passports, that kind of thing. There's nothing sort of on a world scale or economics that was a dominant, motivator. So it kind of stood to reason that it would be a similar mandate in the end.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure what they would have seen that.
Well, I mean, they tried to tell everybody that it was about trying to get a mandate, right? And the reality is they already had a mandate. They had a mandate in the fact that they didn't have any problem passing any of the legislation they wanted to. So they were hoping for 4 years of less accountability. And what we got was a government with exactly the same results. The difference is now that we needed two parties to pass everything before, like a bloc and the NDP, or the NDP and the Conservatives. Now they only need one party, so they can work and probably form some type of coalition with the NDP. I would not be surprised if this government potentially went longer, because if the NDP is looking at national pharmacare or dental care, any of these things they talked about, I could see them supporting them in the short term for a longer period of time than sort of the typical 18 months to 2 years. But time will tell when we go back and we understand where things are going, what conversations have been had between Justin and Jagmeet. So we'll wait and see. But that was exactly it. People didn't really feel there was any compelling issue. Concerns are still, as we talked about before, people are having a hard time attracting staff, and businesses are struggling from that perspective. Our border issues are still a challenge in terms of that, and sort of getting back to some type of normalcy is definitely on top of people's minds.
top of mind. It doesn't matter if you're just, if you're working, not working, old, young,
Absolutely.
That's something that touches absolutely everyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, our leader was not able to push through.
I was going to ask you about that because on election night, or the following morning, when we were talking for the story that I did for the paper, you were talking about Aaron O'Toole's performance, and basically you're kind of summarizing, but your comment was, Jagmeet's been around for a while. People certainly know who Justin Trudeau is. Maybe they weren't quite familiar enough with O'Toole and what he does and represents. Now, I don't think, my own view is, I don't think he did himself any favors by changing a couple of views on some key policies, at the three-quarter poll of the race. For me, I appreciate when a politician changes their mind, as long as whatever they go to, they back it and they stand by it and that kind of thing, because that tells me that they're listening. Like someone who just digs in and, says this is the way it's going to be no matter what, and they don't necessarily believe it. Like, you want somebody that you can believe in and believes what they're selling. So I don't have a problem with the change of change of policy. But the timing certainly would have been unfortunate when you're in the middle of an election race to do that. So, your comment was that the people don't know him, and let's let them hang around a bit and see how the next go round goes.
Yeah, no, and I think that it's always an issue, right? Longevity for a leader is always credibility in politics, right? If people don't know who you are, they're skeptical. They
believe who you are,
right?
They need to believe you.
Absolutely, and the challenge with the new person is that the Libs ran a very negative campaign on Aaron, successfully, one would argue. As far as that, he did, change on a couple of items that he went into the campaign sort of looking at. But I think the elephant in the room was definitely the PPC from a conservative point of view. There was, I think, almost 26 seats, 26. And I said during the campaign that the Conservatives lost 7 seats last time as a result across the country, not just here in Ontario, because of the PPC vote. We had seats where we lost by 400, where PPC got 800.
Right.
I don't believe all the votes that went to PPC were all conservative votes, but
that shows from this breakdown when you look at where losses came and PPC went up. It shows that it was spread across 3 parties, even 4.
And I think the polling indicated up to that their support was coming from all parties. So while the average of the country, I think, was around 5 and change, here in in our riding, Niagara West, it was over 7%, 7.1, 7.2. So that was a challenge, and that was definitely the elephant in the room. I think there was over 25 or 26 seats that may have flipped back to conservative if that was so. I don't think we probably did a great job addressing some of PPC's concerns. At the end of the day, I think there's probably some things that we could probably agree on. Maybe others we can't. Didn't matter. They weren't convinced our party would support them, and so people. I had people that voted for me my whole life that said I'm not going to vote for you this time because I'm not sure about your leader. That's what they told me. And I had other people I could convince and say, well, my track record. I've been around for 17 years, so you know who I am. I would appreciate your personal support for me.
Yeah.
So I think there were definitely people that voted for the PPC in our riding that had supported me in the past because they told me. I don't know who would call you up and say, Dean, we'd like you, but we're not going to vote for you, right? I think that means they're not going to vote for you. So.
I would think I would hope that's a legitimate comment. So on the just with the result, status quo ultimately, what does that do? You mentioned a couple things maybe that you could see being on an immediate Parliament Hill agenda, but how does that, taking what those might be and what you would like to see prioritized, whether nationally or something for Niagara or local, what do you see as immediate issues on the horizon that are going to be on the table?
Yeah, no, I think there's going to be a couple. I think getting people back to work, our economy working continues to be the number one issue, and I think that all parties had
well, the Conservatives drove that home during the election, but the party that won didn't really, Well, but there was some talk with the economy, but
they did talk about. They did talk about some things as well. People probably just think that they're. Listen,
that's why I asked that question, though, because it's going to be their agenda, with some NDP input. And they weren't as focused on the economy as the Conservatives were during the election.
Correct.
And certainly from, being in a newspaper game, dealing with virtually every business in Niagara West in one form or another, it's absolutely paramount to people's livelihoods and, their businesses, their homes, and, paying bills. And there is nothing more important right now.
Yeah. So I think possibly two things. I think possibly one of the messages was sent was that they didn't reward him with a majority either, which was the thought process starting the election.
It was a bit of a check and balance,
right?
I thought.
So I think it's a check and balance, number one. I think number two is that they possibly didn't trust our leader, for either because the Liberals painted him or he had made changes in policy. What doesn't matter, because they didn't believe him that he would deliver what he wanted to do. So then it takes us to our third point, is that people like the status quo, where there's been a lot of support programs. They're expecting more support programs from the Liberals, and I think that's something that they felt comfortable with, of sort of in the middle of a pandemic, in a fourth wave, trusting the person that was there versus some changing up midstream. That's always tough, right? It's tough in a pandemic. We won. Remember the financial crisis? We were in minority governments. People thought we were doing a good job, and they said, we will continue to trust you to move through financially. So it was a combination of the three things. Having checks and balances, not sure about our leader because he was new, and then knowing the programs that the Liberals provided before, like him or not, they were still sure that they were going to have more of the same.
Now, last night I saw on a couple of news broadcasts, the NDP leaders under some leadership pressure. I haven't heard anything about O'Toole's, a challenge to O'Toole or anything like that. Do you foresee any discussion sort of on that at this point?
I think there's always discussions. I noticed yesterday there was a national councillor from Ontario that started an online petition. It's always the way it happens. Started an online petition suggesting that O'Toole needs to go. So there's going to be discussions around that. And, that's going to happen as the party analyzes what happened, what went well, what didn't go well. And I would say that, Mr. O'Toole and the team, believe that there was a victory by holding the Liberals to minority. But there'll definitely be people in the party that thinks that, given all the scandal and issues around Trudeau, that it was a missed opportunity. So same thing happened with our leader in 2019. Andrew Scheer got more votes. I mean, we still took the percentage of votes in this country. We had the higher number total votes, even though we didn't take the number of seats. So there'll be arguments on both sides. It would be interesting to see, as people do the analysis of the numbers, what comes out of over the coming weeks.
Well, while we're speaking of party leaders, was there any other points in the election you wanted to make?
No, just once again, really grateful to see the turnout in Niagara West. And I'm always grateful for the support of our volunteers and the staff and the sign guys and my family and all that stuff. I mean, it is quite a collective effort for all the campaigns, and certainly to all the people that we ran against. For the most part, most of them were very upstanding, and it was great to see it. People put their name on the ballot. It's a lot of work, so good to see.
So, as I was starting to say, mentioning party leaders, I just want to transition to the second part of our discussion today. By noting I had a call Monday from a former progressive conservative leader, and Mr. Mulrooney, which surprised me to no end. Well, maybe not the fact that he called, but it was 20 minutes after I sent an inquiry email to see if I could get a comment on Shirley Martin's passing. And so, let's talk about Shirley first.
Absolutely.
Maybe just explain to people what she did for you.
Yeah. So I knew Shirley for a long time. When I first ran in 2000, unsuccessfully for the Canadian Alliance, Shirley had been a former cabinet minister under the Progressive Conservatives under Mr. Mulrooney. I reached out to Shirley right away. And Shirley, even though I wasn't part of her party, I was in a different party, we had coffee. And we had coffee many times over the years, over the last 20, 21 years. Shirley was just one of those people. Always had a kind word, always had time for people, and always involved.
For everybody.
For everybody. Like, she would take time for anybody. And I'm always impressed with people in public life, It's because it's very demanding of your time that once they're out of public life, they still continue to participate in the community. And Shirley, I mean, we can list all the things that's been said before. It's, McNally House and the hospital, all the things that are so important to our community. And she was involved in every single
Fingers and a lot of pies.
Right?
Very quietly.
So I always think that, one of the things I love so much about her was that she always had a kind word for everybody. And she always took time, as you said, for no matter who you were, she'd take time. And so even though I was a guy that represented another party, not hers, she would always take time to sit down and talk. And when the parties finally merged again in 2004, she was supportive right from day one. And we've had a great relationship over the years. We'd pick up the phone and talk about what's going on. It's always nice to have someone who's been there and knows and understands the way things work. And she'd ask me,
there's not many of those people around in the immediate area.
Well, I mean, but she would always be there to say, hey, what's going on over with this file? Or, sometimes it's...
Well, she was another level.
Right.
Like, people will come and say, how's it going in Ottawa? Or what's the hot issue? She knows what the hot issue is.
Absolutely.
She wants to know who's doing what.
Who's doing what, exactly. And so that was always pretty neat as well.
And that's true of local issues.
Yeah.
Because when she used to come in, she'd say hi, she'd come and sit in that very chair, and we'd talk about everything, know. And she already knew half the stories, so she's looking to...
fill in the blanks.
Yes.
But, that's insider baseball, right? So many people don't know what's going on locally because they're detached or they got busy lives. Likewise with Ottawa, she would be an insider. So she would understand and ask the appropriate questions to either fill in the blanks or to look and find out what was going on.
See, that was part of the polish that I always appreciated about her, because before she formed an opinion, I would bet she talked to 8, 9, even 10 people to fill in the blanks, then would think she has an opinion, and would always be open to more information and listening. Great listener. And you could tell by the questions that came back, because they almost always spun off what you said as opposed to leading down some other path. I just always appreciated, and she could, there's not a whole lot of people in the area that could fill in some blanks for me. And I don't mean to sound silly, but my job is to know things.
You have the pulse. Exactly. That's what I was reading.
And people trust me, so they tell me a lot of things.
Right.
Shirley would come in and say, I got something for you.
Have you heard this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was always great. But, you just mentioned, excuse me, about her positivity. And that was the thing. Like, I really wish, I was so surprised when Mr. Mulrooney called. I was working at home, and I saw a 514 light up on my phone. And I thought it was the assistant, because I asked the assistant to call or email to confirm that they got the information. And I just thought it was the assistant calling to confirm, because it was so quick. And I talked to him for 2 or 3 minutes before I even started to take notes. And I realized, holy cow, I'm talking to Brian Mulrooney. And, okay, so I had to open a file, start doing it. But one of the things that he noted was, he said the first thing he always noticed when she walked in a room, she always had a bright smile, very positive. And that could lighten the mood of, a cabinet meeting, a policy meeting, anything that, she always had that presence about her. And the thing that I wish that I had, excuse me, was I wish I had to record it, because I tried to put it in the paper, but you can't convey the passion. You could tell that he had a deep appreciation for the lady.
Yeah. And that's one thing you just mentioned, is that, there are positive people and negative people in this world, right? But you're right. It was almost like she was always on. She always on, right? And I always remember her as being classy, elegant, friendly, outgoing, kind, all the things.
But approachable. Always.
But always approachable. And that's the difference. Some politicians aren't approachable. Yeah. And they go, she's too important. She was a cabinet minister. She was down to earth, regular folk. She loved her family. She loved her boys.
We had a lady come in and pick up a paper yesterday. Oh, Shirley Martin passed. I didn't know she was an MP. She'd known her for 10 years. Talked to her quite a bit.
That's amazing.
It never even came up.
Yeah. Yeah. I posted...
That's a whole major past life, but she was just Shirley to a lot of people.
Well, and I think even her, because I didn't know her career, I know she worked at Bell at a young age and read in the paper in the obituary, but I posted her obituary on my social media. I had people reaching out to me saying, my mother worked with Shirley Martin, and Shirley was always this awesome lady. So it's not you or I. It's like every story.
Show. It was no show.
You know, and if you're, but that speaks to her character, right?
Yeah.
So if you are putting it on, there are always going to be people that you can't put it on for all the time. But if it's part of your character and who you are, then you appear and you are the same way
Shirley
to everybody.
Shirley,
yeah, with Shirley.
Yeah.
I mean, and she was,
and a lot of groups and people benefited because of it.
100%.
Whether it was McNally, the hospital, Rotary Club.
Yeah.
Everything she touched, she put in effort, max effort, all the time.
No, absolutely. And I can't go without saying something about her family. I mean,
I want to talk about Jack also.
Okay, perfect.
Right? Jack passed away 3 weeks to the day prior to Shirley. And maybe you can speak about Jack.
Yeah, so Jack was an awesome guy. I mean, he had the best sense of humor. He was always supportive of Shirley, and they had such an awesome relationship. They were, what year were they in their marriage? It was
69.
Was it 69?
I think it was 69.
It was unbelievable. But you know, Jack was always that support there. I mean, and she always talked. You know, she had the public persona. She had the public life, but she always talked about what a rock Jack was for her. And she was always so proud of her kids. She had Chris living up in Ottawa, and she had John, who lives in Lincoln and's got businesses here and in the U.S. She couldn't say enough. She was so proud of them, and of course her grandkids as well. And I think that also speaks volumes to her as a family person as well.
Yep. Is there? I don't want to limit any input on Shirley. Or is there any anecdote or something a piece of advice she gave you, or anything in particular that comes to mind when you think about all your discussions with her over the years?
Yeah, I think one thing that always will stand out was, back in 2000, 2004, the parties were divided, right? And I remember having coffee with her, and I said, we gotta get together, And she was always loyal to Brian Mulroney, to the Progressive Conservative Party. But she was always willing to have a conversation, and she realized that maybe at some point in time the parties would need to merge. But she was loyal to where she was, the party that brung her, right? It wasn't that she was going to switch parties or that kind of stuff. And just the fact that she was so pragmatic, always willing to listen, always had time, for that to me is, meant the world. So
yeah, and you like you say, because of that, you always knew what you had or what you could expect from Shirley in terms of input and value back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for coming in again, Dean. We'll have to make this an every other week thing for the next year or so.
Well, thank you. Thank you as well.
I appreciate you coming in. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.